Welcome to the Escape and Empower podcast. Escape from the corporate rat race to empowered franchise ownership. Are you ready to take control of your destiny, follow your dreams, and live life on your own terms? Join our hosts, Dave and Pete, for insights on how to break free from the corporate grind, ditch the 9-to-5, and step into empowered franchise ownership.
Welcome to the Escape and Power podcast. My name is Pete Gilfill, and I'm here with my podcast partner, Dave Greenberg. Good morning, Dave.
Good morning, Pete. What a wonderful day here in Nashville, Tennessee.
Woo! I got to tell you, I was watching some of that hockey, some of the playoffs, and it's some great hockey. So I like this time of year. Stanley Cup hockey is my kind of time of year.
I want the Preds to play back in it someday. We're still thinking of Cam, our new quarterback that we got for the Titans out of West Columbia, Texas.
Right. So lots of good sports stuff going on. That's good news. We got all this sports, but I thought today, one of the things we always try to talk about is answer a question. And We're seeing a lot of news right now about white-collar positions rapidly being eliminated. This is kicked off a couple years ago, and I think about the shocking story of a large tech company. They laid off 20% of their middle management, just compressed their management layers, right? So we're seeing more and more of that. It was a bold move then. Now we're seeing it's kind of mainstream. So maybe we talk about all the reasons why these collar jobs, these great jobs, are being rapidly eliminated. What do you think?
I think that's great, Pete. The good news for us is we've had more activity in our pipeline because we help those people who are thinking about that transition because of what we're about to talk about.
Yeah, we help people escape the corporate world, right? And it may be a transition, a plan to have a side business and escape, or this idea of just get out totally, right? Like you and I did, right? We just escaped and took control of our destiny. We're going to see more and more of these corporate positions being eliminated, right? We see all the layoffs. So let's talk about, I think the first one is we're seeing more and more automation and AI-driven efficiency that is wiping out positions.
I totally agree. Retail e-commerce folks. I have about 4 of them right now that I'm working with because AI is all over it. And AI is a whole lot expensive, and they're training it to be super effective.
Yeah, I think about like a blinds company, right? They use AI with their salespeople, right? So the salesperson goes out and meets with a family or business owner. They're going through the stuff. AI records the conversation and actually makes recommendations on the window treatments, and also in a way in which the salesperson can do a better job, right? You could take out this sales manager right there, right? You don't need a sales manager if you got AI helping these salespeople learn and produce at a higher level.
And, taking out the errors, taking out the inefficiency, taking out the maybe personal agendas to really deliver on what the customer's asking for. It's real, it's happening, and it's going to continue to happen over time because it's going to get smarter and smarter and drive more efficiencies into the process.
Yeah, the Harvard Business Review had an article how AI automation is replacing traditional jobs, right? This is real from that standpoint. So that's one. What would be a second example of AI, or these ideas of positions being eliminated? What would be a second reason why they are being eliminated?
Well, you and I went through this many times, Pete. How many times did we reorganize the field at Ford Motor Company? 27 regions, 12 districts, 8 regions, 7 districts. I came home from my honeymoon and they said, hey, your job's in Dallas, pack up. That's when we reduced the regions from whatever to whatever. So what's behind that? Well, they're cutting costs. They got to maximize profitability. There's pressure on costs these days for all the reasons that we could talk about for days. But what are they going to do? They're not going to sit back. They're not going to take the markets or the revenue out of the marketplace, products out of the marketplace. They're going to really figure out how they reduce costs. And what's one of the biggest items on the income statement? Well, personnel expense. So how can you become more efficient? And the companies are going to continue to be under immense pressure to improve financial performance. And unfortunately, people are the biggest cost.
Yeah, it's the biggest lever they can pull to reduce costs. And you see a lot of short-sighted efforts being done, meaning they will cut people just to make a quarterly number, which seems
Right.
crazy to me, right? But
Right.
that's the reality is there's so much pressure and they're going to do whatever they can to get that quarterly number so they get their bonus, the shares go up and stuff like that. But it's very short-sighted. And you kind of read the Forbes article how companies are cutting jobs to maximize profitability. I mean, they highlight why this is happening. It's kind of scary.
And when they do that, they flatten organizational structures.
Yeah, I think that's the third one, right? They're just taking layers out. I mean, at Ford, we had a lot of layers of management, and you see now that they're just cutting out. They don't need, a general manager, a regional manager, a zone manager. They don't need three levels out in the field.
And there's a number of good articles, whether it's a Harvard Business Review of flattening hierarchies or the rise of the flat management structures in Forbes. Reducing bureaucracy and improving communication just improves the velocity of business and makes better, higher performing teams. So it's good for the business. It's good for improving your competitive position, but unfortunately it puts the squeeze on people that, ultimately will find a need to transition into something else. And also, there's been this big change of a rise in remote work or hybrid work in the marketplace.
Yeah, you saw that with COVID, right? That really changed it. Where now positions, you don't necessarily need positions in the offices, right? So with more remote work, hybrid, stuff like that, you just kind of see that this isn't needed anymore. So it's kind of the end of the office. I know they're trying to bring workers back, but remote work is kind of redefining everything.
I look at my daughter and my son, and they're both in the trades, whether they're attorneys or architects. They have the ability to do their work wherever they are. Now, certainly you need to collaborate, you need to be inside, but they're running hybrid models. So, you and I used to get a Friday off when we took a Friday off, PT. Today, they work from home, and it really, honestly, it's added joy to them in the workplace. Because they get to manage their Fridays. And honestly, working around the house, taking a break, doing the laundry, jumping out in the backyard and thinking about what they're going to do for the weekend, all works into their workday, and they're not less effective. They're actually more effective.
Yeah, right. When you start working remote, you don't need to have necessarily that office manager that's there managing, coordinating desks and phones and stuff like that. It's just a simpler business model for sure.
Right.
What about this digital transformation and technology integration? I believe that's helping reduce or take down white collar jobs. So what do you think about that?
Oh, I think it's going to continue to move and grow and move at a faster pace. I mean, technology is not going away. You see what's happening in a lot of our franchise offerings. We always talk about tech stacks these days. What is their digital go-to-market strategy? What is their inbound call center? How does their tech stack enable them to manage their product offerings, get requests for quotes done in speed? I was looking at one franchise offering the other day with a candidate, and they're in a pretty complicated space where they coordinate a number of subcontractors in the home finishing space. And ultimately, they produce a quote in 24 hours, which is kind of long, but it's a complicated quote. But they also will build the work and schedule the work within 2 to 5 days, which is really impressive. And there's a pool company that does the same thing. You can run your whole business on an iPhone if you're truly tech savvy. So this is happening in all businesses, and it's really happening in the franchise space as well for the people that are franchisors that are really leading the way.
Well, and if you're an older executive, maybe you're just not quite as familiar with the technology. And if you're not keeping up, that makes you obsolete. And I think that's part of the digital transformation is taking out layers of management, but also people that are just not keeping up with the change that's going on.
And the changing workforce and is a change to the company culture. And today's workforce is more flexible, more inclusive, and kind of purpose-driven. And when you think of the organizations eliminating senior level positions to move to a flatter, more collaborative work cultures, it really empowers the lower level employees to contribute more in the decision making process. And I see that as a real big positive, but it reinforces the stuff we've talked about, that flattening of organizations and pulling out the bureaucracy can really create an advantage for a company.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, when you have ability to move a little bit faster, when you're leveraging technology, you're leveraging remote work, you're not hung up on facilities, a lot of heavy assets, and so you can move a little bit faster. I mean, it's bottom line is reshaping corporate America. I think a little bit about that. There's now 5 generations in the workforce, which has never happened before. And this is kind of crazy. And to the point is that what drives a Gen X person might be different than a baby boomer, right? As crazy as that may be. And so we're really kind of seeing these cultures change, and it's being facilitated with technology and this flexible work style.
I don't know, I forget the cohort name, but my daughter and her husband are 28 and 29. Fun that they continue to save for, because if they want new gutters, I used to put them on myself. They hire a person to get it done, which is really good for, essential home-based service businesses. And there's a lot of stuff in the franchising space that deliver on those service needs in the industry. But it's been pretty interesting to kind of see how all this has changed, and the effect of the younger generations coming up. They have a totally different perspective on things.
Why spend my time to do that? I want to be traveling. I don't want to be putting up gutters, right? So I get it.
Right.
Totally get that. What about we see a lot of mergers, acquisitions, and downsizing happening? We've talked about this in the past, and that's certainly taking out white collar positions.
Yeah, it's redundancy. I mean, why else are you going to merge? You're going to be able to become more efficient. You're going to be able to wrap products into your portfolio that you don't offer. But whenever you do that, it's all natural. There's 2 CFOs all the time. So what do? One goes. And there's 2 CEOs, and that goes all the way down the senior level ranks. And typically, mid-level folks hang in there because they're the ones that are doing the work, not leading the work. So they're really required. And that again shows that, these downsizing effects on executive positions are real. And there's been it's been talked about in the Wall Street Journal, the Harvard Business Review. And that's creating a lot of transition in the marketplace for executives.
Yeah, and you could be doing a great job, and all of a sudden your company's acquired and you're considered redundant. Right, which
Right.
means we don't need you anymore. And you can appreciate that. She was a CFO for a company, and they got purchased, and she was kind of packaged out. They didn't need her anymore. So, what about this? This drive to more performance-based accountability and results. Right. Bottom line is that people have to deliver, because we can now use AI and other technology to really measure people's performance.
If you can't adapt and you can't change and you can't stay on point with fast moving business decisions, you're just going to have to get out of the way.
Yeah.
And, maybe it's time for people to think about that, recognize it, and not wait for the transition to happen to you, and rather, get ahead of it and start thinking about what are you going to do to not be single-threaded on your income stream, and have your own transition plan, whether it's a new W-2 or going into business for yourself. I think people seeing the writing on the wall, especially in the world of ageism, it's time to kind of take that self-assessment leap, which is sometimes hard, and decide what you're going to do before it's decided for you.
Yeah, I just had a good friend. He was a senior level executive, and he basically decided to step back from his leadership position and take a lower role just to get back his life. He couldn't take the pressure anymore, and rightfully so. It starts eating into your health, all that kind of stuff, and sometimes it's not worth the money, right? And
Right.
so you see more and more pressure on these executives to deliver numbers with higher costs out there and all this other stuff that's going on. And it can be too much. And so, to your point, is that you may start putting together a plan where you can escape the corporate world on your terms. Because I've always used this stat, right? 50% of 50-plus-year-old corporate executives are pushed out of their company before they're ready. And
Right.
you and I have seen that. And, you've got pushed out, and we understand this. And so that's a big deal. What about this idea of leveraging data to make decisions? So I'm an executive. I now have access to much more data than I ever did. And I don't need as many, for lack of better terms, supporting executives behind me because I've got a lot of extra data.
I remember the days we used to go to the executives and explain what the data meant, and where the outcomes and the drivers behind it. And in today's world, it's all done for you.
Yeah.
You can load the data into something, and it will tell you what the root causes are and what the recommended directions are. I mean, that happens all day long, and rather than carrying a six-figure executive, that can be delivered through AI and through smart data analysis and even some data scientists. And again, these are the things that are leading to the reducing the requirements and value of the executives that are running the business today, because they're not needed.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you think about it, a lot of times back when we were in the corporate world, you had data, but you didn't have a lot of great data. And a lot of times you had to go on your gut, your experience, right? You're going through that. And now they can use data to make very sophisticated decisions. And so it's kind of the new type of leadership is data-driven decision making.
When you think of it, when you're not only working with the data, you have to work with insights, which is kind of a bit of entrepreneurship, right? There's not always a roadmap unless you're with a franchise, because that's a proven business concept with a playbook. But, we've talked about and we'll continue to talk about entrepreneurship and how innovation, is really a part of it. And it's overcoming corporate bureaucracy that just can't think differently.
Yeah, well, I think some of these startups are right. They're coming in and they're disrupting industries. Think about
Right.
like Tesla coming in and disrupting the auto industry back in its day, right? You're
Right.
seeing more and more people bringing that entrepreneur spirit to big corporations where they move a little bit faster from that standpoint, don't do the traditional things. And so I think that's a big change.
Right.
Sure.
Right. Absolutely.
Bottom line is whether we like it or not, the white collar jobs are being phased out. There are gonna be less white collar jobs. It being as on the wall, we've given you 10 reasons why. And we work with people all the time that are senior level executives that are in pain. They're experiencing this stuff. They have a number on their back. And it has to be where they start putting a plan in place to protect themselves, to create career and income security, to protect their future. And if you just sit there and hope you're not going to be a number down the line, it's coming. It's just when. And so that's what you and I do is help executives find a potential path to franchise ownership.
Yeah, and I would say, Pete, when it happens to you, your runway all of a sudden is 3 months, 6 months, 9 months. Get ahead of it. All right. I understand loyalty. It's an admirable thing. I was overly loyal. Get ahead of it. Have the conversation now. Think about your plan so they don't create one for you. And you can reach out to Pete at hireyourself.com. You can reach out to myself, Dave, at empoweredfranchisee.com. Schedule a 15-minute call with us to explore the opportunities of maybe investing in yourself and owning your own business.
Let's encourage everybody to subscribe, follow us, and I look forward to our next conversation.
All right, keep it going, Pete.
Thanks for tuning in to the Escape and Empower podcast. We hope today's discussion has inspired you to consider franchise ownership as a path to living life on your own terms. Start your journey towards financial freedom and flexibility. Connect with Dave at empoweredfranchisee.com or Pete at hireyourself.com. Until next time.